Here's a hard truth. The person who made you feel abandoned, dismissed, or too sensitive is probably thinking about you more than you know. But why won't they ever say it? Modern society glorifies independence, detachment, and emotional control. We applaud those who can move on quickly, those who act unbothered, as if longing or missing someone is a sign of weakness. But behind that calm, cool exterior is something avoidantly attached people rarely admit. They miss you deeply, confusingly, silently. Right now, you might be wondering, how could they be so cold? Did I even mean anything to them? Was it all in my head? But here's what you don't see. They're also sitting somewhere, haunted by a random song, a passing memory, a tiny detail, and they don't understand why. This isn't just emotion, it's neuroscience. It's the nervous system in survival mode. It's emotional avoidance, dressed up as composure. They won't say it, but they remember. Avoidance doesn't mean they don't feel, and it certainly doesn't mean they never loved you. They loved, but in a way that's suppressed, distorted, like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, too afraid to jump. Not because they don't want to, but because they were never taught how to swim. Avoidants aren't running from you. They're running from themselves, from the tender, vulnerable, connection-seeking parts of their own psyche. When the relationship ends, they don't rage, beg, or cry. They freeze their face blank, their mood unreadable. From the outside, you'd think they're fine. But what you don't see is that while you're lying awake, hurting, replaying every moment, they're also unraveling quietly. The difference? In their world, emotion is not allowed to exist out in the open, because from an early age, they were taught emotion equals danger. Needing others equals weakness. So they train themselves to escape their own heart. You leave. They go silent. You send that final message. They never reply. You crave closure. They meet you with a wall of silence. But that silence doesn't mean they feel nothing. It means they don't know how to feel. They don't have emotional vocabulary. They don't have processing tools. Then, just when they think the chapter is closed, while clipping their nails, driving alone, working late, you appear, a smell, a song, a snippet of conversation, a flash of you in a dream, and suddenly what they thought was buried tears open like a mental rupture. It startles them, it confuses them, but they won't tell anyone because that's how avoidants survive, by pretending nothing is happening. Their mind works in fragments. Emotions are pushed into some inner storage, locked away from conscious access. But the paradox is, what gets suppressed never disappears. It simply finds a back door, a random intrusive thought. Why do I still remember that night so vividly? Or why did I dream of her again? Or why does this new person's laugh leave me cold? These are cracks in the armor, and behind them lies a flood of unprocessed emotion, waiting for the first chance to rise. The truth is, they learned to move on by disconnecting from their feelings. But you weren't a theory. You weren't a passing phase. You were the person who for a moment made them feel safe enough to be soft, and they didn't know what to do with that. So they did the only thing they knew. They withdrew. And right in that moment, when they thought they were finally free from the relationship, a familiar bag, a pair of shoes like yours, becomes a verdict overturned. Their nervous system, once frozen in silence, suddenly jolts awake, like a memory being decrypted, and they're confused. Why did that tiny detail make my chest tighten? See, avoidance doesn't mean they don't think of you. It just means they think in ways even they don't recognize. The triggers come unannounced, ambushing them on the days they believe they're at peace. And the first of these, false progress, is perhaps the most deceptive. Trigger 1, false progress. I blocked her, hit the gym, started eating Greek yogurt. I thought I was fine until I saw someone with her exact bag. Avoidants think they've moved on. They build evidence to prove it, unfollow, new stories, a packed schedule, a new haircut, a cleaned up apartment, travel plans. Outwardly, it looks like progress, but inwardly, nothing has truly shifted. Psychologist Sandermine calls this delayed grief reaction. Grief postponed, suppressed at the time of the loss, only to reappear later in unexpected forms. This is especially common for avoidantly attached people because they've trained themselves since childhood not to feel. When they experienced early emotional neglect or invalidation, they learned to pack up pain and bury it where no one could reach. So when a relationship ends, they do the same. Pack you away, your voice, your touch, your patience, and toss it into a locked mental basement. That's it. Done. Over. But you can't force a nervous system that never learned how to mourn to heal just because it's running or eating better. When you don't actually feel, you don't actually recover, you just close the door. And every closed door has a moment when it violently bursts back open. An avoidant's inner world runs on control and suppression. When something breaks their grip, like a song from your favorite cafe or someone casually mentioning your name, something inside them cracks. Not tears, not sobbing, just a flooding of memories they can't explain. Maybe they'll feel anxious out of nowhere. Maybe they'll snap at someone or struggle to sleep. Or maybe they'll just keep thinking about you and not know why. Because in the avoidant mind, emotions don't come in clean lines. They arrive sideways, illogically, and most often after they think they've moved on. And here's the paradox. The moment an avoidant feels most stable is often when they're most at risk of being triggered. Because that stability isn't healing. It's emotional numbness. And the human nervous system is not wired to stay numb forever. It will always try to feel, and so they start asking questions. If I'm over her, why do I still remember that night so clearly? If I'm fine, why did her eyes in that dream make me feel like I couldn't breathe? Why do I keep hearing her voice in my head saying, please don't leave me alone like that? You can't measure someone's healing by how calm they seem, especially not an avoidant, because calm is their mask. And behind that mask lies a glacier of frozen emotion waiting for the right memory to melt it. And this is what unsettles avoidance the most. They thought you were just a phase, a temporary detour in their lives, an experience they could fold away and tuck into a drawer. But then you stepped out of that version of yourself. You changed. You became happy with someone, nothing like them. Trigger 2, mirror image disruption. He's nothing like me. Smiles too much. Probably journals. This isn't just a throwaway line of jealousy. It's a glimpse into the fracture of a self-protective narrative. You see, for an avoidant to walk away from a relationship they once felt something in, they need a reason. And often it's a reason they manufacture themselves. Phrases like, we were too different, she was too much, or I need someone quieter aren't just explanations, they're psychological life rafts. According to the defensive attribution hypothesis in social psychology, people have a tendency to blame external factors when it helps protect their internal self from guilt or shame. Avoidants are particularly skilled at this. If the relationship failed, it must be because you were too emotional, not because they were emotionally unavailable. But what happens when you start dating someone completely unlike them? Someone warm, expressive, secure, emotionally grounded, and you're thriving? Their defense system starts to short circuit. You become a mirror, and suddenly the reflection you hold up no longer supports the story they've been telling themselves. If she needed someone less intense, why is she glowing with someone more open, more alive, more emotionally available? They might not say it aloud, but internally, something cracks because it opens up a possibility they can't stomach. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I walked away from something real because I was scared. Ironically, in the mind of an avoidant, you're no longer just an ex. You become a living comparison, not between you and their new partner, but between who they were with you and who they are without you. Maybe a mutual friend tells them, You were different when you were with her, softer, more open. Or maybe they remember your eyes that last time, not angry, just sad, and that sadness, calm, unblaming, is the thing that haunts them most. This taps into a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that happens when one's internal beliefs, so we'll want right for each other, clash with external evidence. You'll want, she's doing better now, happier with someone new. Avoidants aren't equipped to handle this well. They aren't used to admitting fault, and they definitely aren't used to sitting with regret. So instead of reaching out or reflecting openly, they do what they know best, stay silent, but think constantly. They watch from afar. They replay things in their mind, but this time no logic can fully quiet the questions because you've changed in ways they can't deny. And that's when you show up without actually showing up, not through a message, not through a social post, but through a song playing in the background at a cafe, the faint scent of the detergent you once used, or the way a chair sinks slightly when someone sits in it just like you used to. You're not there, and yet you are. Trigger 3, emotional home invasion. I was just doing chores. The room was strangely quiet, and suddenly it felt like something was missing. It's not a sadness they can name, not a clear I miss her. It's a visceral state, hijacked by unnamed emotion, like the room echoing with a sound they can't hear. Avoidants don't recognize it right away. They just feel ungrounded, agitated, unsettled, because they're used to control. They're used to intellectualizing feelings. But this time, their logic can't keep up. This is when sensory memory and procedural memory quietly take over. Unlike thoughts you can narrate, these forms of memory live in routines, space, and automatic reflexes. For example, they walk past a bakery and catch a scent that reminds them of breakfast with you. They absent-mindedly prepare coffee the way you used to. In these moments, memory doesn't need to be named. It replays itself through touch, taste, sound, and atmosphere. Ironically, these unspoken memories are the ones that slip past every defense mechanism because you don't have to be present for them to remember you. Their body remembers for them. The environment remembers for them. Their nervous system, once frozen for survival, begins to thaw. Not by force, but by tiny, mundane, deeply personal details that only mean something because of you. And they don't understand why. On an otherwise ordinary day, with no logical trigger, a wave of emptiness suddenly floods their chest, like a ghost knocking on a door they thought was sealed shut. They don't talk about it. They can't even articulate it, but they feel in a way that even they weren't prepared for. Trigger 4, the unsent message. I wrote a long message, then deleted it, rewrote it, deleted it again. Now it's stuck in my head. For most people, writing a message and not sending it might just mean a change of heart. But for an avoidant, it's an emotional battle because in the moment they're typing, even if it's just, I miss you or I've been thinking about the last time we talked, they're not just writing to you, they're knocking on the door of the part of themselves they've kept locked away, the part that feels, grieves, desires connection. But like an unhealed wound that stings when touched, their defense system snaps back the moment emotion surfaces. A familiar voice whispers in their mind, "Don't be weak." They won't reply. "You're overreacting. Silence is safer." This is a textbook case of what psychology calls approach avoidance conflict, the tug of war between the desire to connect and the fear of what might happen next. They want to reach out, but reaching out means risk. Losing control over the outcome. Opening the door to rejection and avoidance, fear that more than anything. So they don't send it. But the almost act of sending becomes a trigger of its own. They think about that message over and over. They imagine what you would have said if they had sent it. They picture what it would feel like if you hadn't responded. And just like that, they spiral into emotional obsession. The painful irony? If they had just sent the message even once, everything might be clearer. Whether met with warmth or silence, they would at least have closure. But avoidants don't operate that way. They don't seek clarity. They seek momentary safety, and sometimes not sending is the safest option they know. But in doing so, they trap themselves in a loop of unresolved emotion. The unsent message doesn't disappear. It becomes a ghost memory, haunting, half alive, half dead, lingering in the background of their thoughts. And that's why weeks or even months later, you'll still see them accidentally liking an old story or sending a vague text like, "Hey, how have you been?" It's not that they need to know how you are. It's that they're still trying to send that message they never had the courage to send. Only now it's in disguise. Trigger 5. The secure stranger. She's great, polite, patient, not demanding. You text her, she responds. You go quiet, she doesn't overreact. Everything is exactly how it's supposed to be. Exactly the kind of low drama presence you thought you wanted. So why do you keep thinking about your ex? Avoidants often believe that if they could just meet the right person, someone who isn't clingy, overly emotional, or demanding, then it would finally work. And then they do meet that person, someone with a secure attachment style, someone whose presence doesn't pressure them, someone who respects their space, someone who asks for nothing more than what they're ready to give. But there's a problem. Their heart doesn't react. And that's what confuses them. Logically, they know this person is good, but emotionally, their system stays flatlined. No excitement, no longing, no emotional activation, just a calm emptiness. Dr. Nicole LaPera explains that people raised in unstable, high-stress, or emotionally chaotic environments often develop a tendency to mistake emotional intensity for love. For them, calm feels like boredom, and their nervous system, which has been trained to stay hypervigilant, doesn't light up in the presence of safety. Ironically, when an avoidant finally finds what they thought they wanted, a peaceful, steady love, it's the very absence of conflict that unsettles them. They don't feel present in the relationship. There's nothing to analyze, to escape from, to survive. And so their mind, used to emotional storms, starts drifting back to the one place they felt something, even if it hurt you. Not because you're better than the current person, but because you're where their nervous system once fired on all cylinders, even if it was chaos. You were familiar, even when it was painful. And the truth is, most avoidants have no idea how to process love when it arrives quietly, without pressure, without the need to prove anything. So they start feeling confused, then numb, then nostalgic. And it's in the peacefulness of their new relationship that they begin to miss you, not because you were easier, but because you made them feel alive, even if it was in panic. Trigger 6. The unexpected compliment. You used to laugh more. You were softer back then. Al, you were different when you were with them. Just an offhand remark from a friend, a sibling, maybe someone who didn't mean anything by it. Yet for someone with an avoidant attachment style, those kinds of comments pierce through the defenses they've spent so long reinforcing. Not every compliment feels good, especially when the compliment no longer applies to who they are now and is tied to someone they've pushed away. For the avoidant, it can shake their emotional foundation. Why? Because this ties into a psychological concept known as reflected appraisal. The idea that we come to understand who we are through how others see us. We internalize our identity based on what's mirrored back to us by people around us. So when someone says, you seemed softer when you were with her, what they hear isn't just a comment. What they hear is a quiet verdict. You're not like that anymore. And the painful part? They know it's true. Avoidants don't just suppress negative emotions. They also suppress the best parts of themselves. When they exit a relationship, They don't just leave the other person, they often leave behind the better version of themselves that showed up in that relationship. So a seemingly harmless compliment like, "You were brighter, more alive back then," becomes a subtle but deep crack in the illusion of self-sufficiency they've tried to maintain. Because if they really were better when they were with you, then the loss isn't just about the relationship, it's about part of who they used to be. And from that moment on, the questions start to haunt them. Did I lose the best version of myself? Can I ever find that version again without going back? Or was I only that person because they were in my life? Avoidants struggle with the idea that they might need others to become whole. They believe in independence, in control, in detachment. But a compliment like that, gentle, honest, shatters that entire belief system. So even if they don't say anything, the regret lingers, not necessarily because they want to come back, but because they once became someone they never imagined they could be. And the only person who ever saw that version of them was you. Avoidants don't forget you, not because you were the exception, but because you were the emotional experience their nervous system never fully processed. We often mistake their silence for indifference, but in truth, it's a survival response. The avoidant brain is wired to avoid not just feelings, but also the memories tied to those feelings. If they don't touch it, they don't hurt. If they don't name it, they don't have to face it. But avoidance is not resolution, because deep emotional experiences, the looks, the words, the quiet moments you gave them, aren't erased by logic. They're stored in the hippocampus, in procedural memory, in routines and restless dreams. And because they never fully felt what happened between you, it remains unfinished, like a loop still open inside them. Avoidants can't face you, because to face you means facing the version of themselves that existed with you. The part that loved, the part that softened, the part that wanted closeness, the part they abandoned, not because you were wrong, but because they weren't ready for who they were becoming. So the next time you wonder, do they ever think about me? Remember that question doesn't just live in your mind, it quietly lives in theirs too. And even if they don't come back, even if they never say it, it doesn't erase this truth. You were the one who touched the part of them they weren't ready to.